The cold blue light of the alien space station filled the long metal corridor. Heavy boots of the alien guards echoed on the floor as they dragged the human prisoner forward. Ethan's hands were locked behind his back with glowing energy cuffs, and his face was bruised. He kept his head high, refusing to show fear, even though he knew his trial would be nothing but a show. The aliens called him a criminal, but he had only defended himself when attacked. Still, here he was, accused of breaking one of their sacred laws, a law he barely understood, from the shadows near a control panel. A young alien girl watched silently. Her name was Lyra, and her silver eyes followed every movement of the guards. Her long white hair shimmered under the station lights, and her hands trembled. This was the human who had once saved her life. Years ago, when she had been trapped inside a burning wreckage, it was Ethan who had pulled her out. No alien had dared to go near the fire, but he had. He had risked his life for her, and now he was about to lose his own because of lies. The guards reached a massive set of metal doors. They pressed their control badges, and the doors slid open with a deep hiss. Inside was a small, dark cell with glowing walls and a humming energy shield. Without a word, they shoved Ethan inside, the shield closing behind him instantly. He stumbled but kept his balance, his sharp eyes scanning the cell for any weakness. He saw nothing. The walls were smooth and unbreakable. Above him, a camera lens blinked red. Watching his every move, Lyra's heart pounded as she watched from the corner of the corridor. She knew the council had ordered Ethan's imprisonment. They claimed he had attacked a senior alien officer, but she had heard whispers in the council chambers. The truth was different. One of the High Council members feared that Ethan knew too much about something secret, something dangerous. They had decided it was easier to lock him away forever than to let the truth come out. A deep voice boomed from the loudspeakers in the corridor. "All personnel, prepare for the trial of the human." It said. Guards began moving toward the Grand Council chamber. Lyra stayed hidden, her mind racing. If she tried to help him, she would be breaking her people's most serious laws. If she did nothing, she would be betraying the one person who had once saved her life. Inside the cell, Ethan sat down on the cold floor. The energy cuffs released with a click now that he was contained. He rubbed his wrists, his expression calm but his mind alert. He knew the trial would not be fair. He knew the verdict had already been decided. But he also knew that somewhere out there, someone might still believe in him. He heard a faint noise, a soft tapping on the wall. He turned his head toward the sound. A tiny panel near the floor slid open, and a familiar silver eye looked through. It was Lyra. Her voice was just above a whisper. "Ethan, can you hear me?" He moved closer, keeping his voice low. "Lyra, you shouldn't be here. I can't let them do this to you," she replied. "If they catch you helping me, they'll lock you up too," he warned. "I owe you my life," she said firmly. Before he could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made her disappear from the panel. The small door slid shut and the wall was silent again. 2 guards entered the cell block, checking the security systems. One of them glanced at Ethan, smirking. "Enjoy your last night of freedom, human." The other laughed. "If you can call this freedom." They left, the door locking behind them. Ethan leaned back against the wall, his jaw tightening. He knew something was coming. And if Lyra was involved, things were about to get dangerous. Far above the cell block, in the council chamber, the alien leaders gathered. Holographic screens showed Ethan's arrest report, but in the corner of the display, one file remained hidden, a recording of the real incident. The council member who had ordered Ethan's arrest sat silently, his hands folded. He knew that if the truth came out, his position and his life would be over. That was why he had to make sure the human never left the prison alive. Lyra stood in the shadows of a maintenance tunnel, thinking fast. She had no plan yet, only a desperate need to act. She couldn't just storm the prison and break Ethan out. Security was too strong. She would need proof of his innocence, proof that could make the council free him. but finding it would mean breaking into the most secure part of the station. And if she was caught, she would share his fate. Still, she clenched her fists and took a deep breath. She had made her choice. She was going to save him, no matter what it cost. Some debts could never be forgotten, and some bonds were stronger than fear. Asterisk. The station's night cycle began, and the bright corridors dimmed to a deep blue glow. The hum of machinery filled the silence as most aliens retreated to their quarters. But deep within the prison sector, one pair of silver eyes stayed open and alert. Lyra waited until the last guard in the hallway passed by. Her heart pounded as she slipped into the restricted corridor. Every step she took was a crime, and she knew the punishment. If anyone saw her here, she would be branded a traitor. The prison gates loomed ahead, made of glowing energy barriers that could cut through steel. She approached the control panel, her fingers shaking as she entered an override code she had stolen from her training days. The barrier flickered, then split open for only a second. She stepped through and let it seal again. Beyond it, the air felt heavier. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the cells. Ethan was lying on the floor, pretending to rest, when he heard the faint hiss of the cell door's manual release. His eyes opened instantly. He sat up and there she was, Lyra, standing in the doorway, her face tense. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered sharply. "I couldn't." "Stay away," she replied, stepping inside. Her voice was low, but her determination was unshaken. "They'll kill you if they see you talking to me," he warned. "They'll kill you if I don't," she shot back. She knelt beside him, pulling a small medical patch from her pocket. He felt a cool sting as she pressed it to the bruise on his temple. "You risked your life for me once," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I won't let that be for nothing," Ethan studied her face, searching for hesitation. But there was none, only fire. "What's your plan?" he asked quietly. "First, I find proof you didn't break the law," she answered. "That won't be easy," he muttered. "They'll keep the truth buried deep. Then I'll dig deeper," she said, her voice cold with resolve. A faint sound cut through their whisper, the distant clank of boots on the floor. Lyra's head snapped toward the sound, her silver eyes narrowing. "They're coming," Ethan said, moving toward the far wall. "You have to go. I'm not leaving you like this," she protested. "You have to," he insisted. "If they catch you, this will all be over before it starts." Her fists clenched, but she knew he was right. She slipped back toward the door, but before leaving, she turned to him. "I'll be back," she promised, her voice low but certain. The sound of approaching voices grew louder. She activated the control panel and slid out of the cell just before the guards turned the corner. The cell door hummed shut, hiding Ethan. Once again in silence, two guards entered the cell block, their eyes scanning the corridor. One paused near Ethan's cell, peering inside. "Still alive, human?" The guard mocked. Ethan said nothing, his expression unreadable. The guards exchanged a glance and moved on. Only after their footsteps faded did Ethan allow himself the smallest smile. She was reckless, but she was also his only hope. In the shadows above the cell block, Lyra slipped into a narrow maintenance tunnel. Her hands still shook from the risk she had taken, but her mind was already racing toward the next step. If she was going to save him, she needed more than courage. She needed the truth, and the only place to find it was inside the alien council's most secure archive, a place no one had ever broken into and lived to tell about it. Somewhere in that archive was the secret that could free Ethan, and Lyra was going to find it, even if it meant facing the council's deadliest guards, even if it meant never going home again. The Alien Council's archive was not just a room, it was a fortress. It sat in the heart of the station, protected by biometric scanners, energy walls, and armed guards who never left their posts. Most citizens had never even seen the door. Lyra had seen it once as a child, and even then, the sight had made her feel small. Now she was going to break into it, not for glory, not for revenge, but for a human who had once pulled her from death. She moved through the service tunnels, Like a shadow, the dim maintenance lights flickered as if they too feared to shine too brightly here. Her hands clutched a stolen access chip, a relic from her days in engineering training. It would not open the archive by itself, but it could bypass the first 2 levels of security. The rest she would have to improvise at the end of the tunnel. She crouched by a grated vent and peered out. 2 guards stood before the archive doors, their armor gleaming under the cold lights. They held long rifles and wore helmets with mirrored visors. Behind them, the door itself shimmered faintly. Lyra knew that was the energy field. Touch it without the correct code, and you would cease to exist. She waited, counting the guards' movements every 40 seconds. One turned to scan the corridor while the other checked the far wall. She timed her breath, then slid out of the vent, staying low. Her feet made no sound on the polished floor. She reached a wall panel and pulled it open, revealing a cluster of glowing wires. Her fingers moved quickly, twisting and cutting. The hallway lights flickered once, and in that moment of distraction, she slipped past the guards, inside the first chamber. The air was cold and dry. Rows of tall black data pillars stretched into the darkness, each humming faintly. This was not the main archive yet, only the outer records room. The real secrets were deeper inside, beyond another layer of security. She approached a console, sliding in the access chip. The screen lit up, asking for an identification code. She typed in a string of numbers she had memorized long ago. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the console beeped and the next door slid open. The inner archive was breathtaking. Columns of crystal data cores glowed with shifting colors. Streams of information floated in the air as holographic threads, each one was a lifetime of records, court files, military logs, classified transmissions. She whispered to herself, "Now, where are they hiding you?" Her hands flew over the console controls. She searched for the day Ethan was arrested. At first, the files appeared clean, all pointing to his guilt, but she knew better. She began digging deeper, bypassing the official logs and slipping into hidden directories. Then she found it, a locked file labeled restricted by order of High Council. Her pulse quickened. This had to be it. She worked on the decryption, sweat running down her temples. Every second in here was a second closer to being caught. Finally, the file unlocked, and the truth spilled out before her eyes. A grainy video recording showed Ethan in a cargo bay. He was helping unload supplies when a senior council member entered with 2 guards. The alien spoke in a low, threatening tone. Ethan's voice was calm but firm, refusing to hand over something. A small black data drive. One of the guards lunged at him, and Ethan defended himself, knocking the guard to the floor. The other guard fired a stun blast, hitting a wall and setting off an alarm. The council member ordered them to make him disappear. It was a setup, plain and clear. Lyra copied the file to a small crystal drive and shut down the console. But as she turned to leave, she froze. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, armored, and holding a rifle. The guard's mirrored visor reflected her own wide eyes. "Step away from the console." His voice echoed through the helmet. Lyra's mind raced. Fight, run, or talk her way out. Instead, she pressed a hidden switch on the drive. Activating a cloaking pulse she had built years ago, the room flickered. And in that split second of distortion, she darted behind a pillar. The guard fired, the blast hitting the console and sending sparks into the air. She ran, weaving through the crystal columns. Alarms began to wail across the archive, red lights flashing overhead. She reached the emergency maintenance hatch and slid through, pulling. It shut just as the guard's footsteps closed in. In the darkness of the tunnel, she allowed herself a single deep breath. The proof was in her hands now, but so was a death sentence. If they found her, they would know exactly what she had. "Stolen," she whispered to herself. "Ethan. Hold on." And then she disappeared into the shadows once more. Asterisk, the alarm screamed across the station. A harsh sound that made even the steel walls seem to vibrate. Red lights pulsed through the corridors like a heartbeat. warning everyone that an intruder had breached a restricted zone. Lyra's boots pounded against the narrow floor of the maintenance tunnel. The stolen crystal drive clutched tight in her hand. Every vent she passed spilled faint light across her face, revealing the sweat on her skin. She could hear the heavy steps of pursuit behind her. More than one set of boots now. Moving fast. Lock down Sector 5. A voice barked through the station's comms. Lyra cursed under her breath. That was the sector she was in. She reached a junction and dropped into a vertical shaft, sliding down the maintenance cables until her boots hit the bottom with a metallic thud. Above her, shadows moved in the opening. The hunters had reached the shaft. She didn't wait to see their faces. She was already running. Far below, in the prison cell, Ethan opened his eyes as the alarms echoed through the block. The guards looked nervous, speaking quickly to one another. From the faint sounds through the wall, Ethan guessed the chaos was not far away. His mind worked fast. Only one person would risk triggering that kind of alarm for him. Lyra, he whispered to himself, a rare flicker of hope in his voice. Meanwhile, Lyra burst out of the maintenance tunnel into a storage bay. Rows of tall crates blocked her view, their metal sides cold to the touch. She darted between them, crouching low. Voices grew closer. The guards were spreading out, using scanners to track her. One beam of light passed just over her head. She froze, holding her breath as a guard walked within arm's reach. The moment he turned away, she slipped behind another crate and made for the far door. She tapped her stolen access chip against the lock. The door slid open, but the instant she stepped through, she came face to face with another guard. His eyes widened in recognition. "It's her!" he shouted. Lyra slammed her shoulder into him before he could raise his rifle. The weapon clattered to the floor as she sprinted down the hallway. Behind her, the shouts multiplied. She was no longer running from just a few guards. She had the whole security division on her trail, back in the cell block. Ethan noticed the guards were distracted, their attention pulled toward the chaos. One left his post. The other leaned against the wall, muttering into his comm device. Ethan's gaze drifted to the door controls just outside the cell. If Lyra made it to him, those seconds could be the difference between escape and capture. He flexed his hands. The cuffs were gone, but he had no weapon. Still, he knew that if she reached him, he would fight his way out no matter what. Lyra turned a sharp corner into a dark corridor. The lights here were dim and flickering, an old part of the station rarely used. Her breathing was fast, but her grip on the crystal drive never loosened. She could feel the weight of what she carried, the truth that could destroy the council. Member who had framed Ethan, she knew if she was caught, the proof would be destroyed before it ever saw daylight. The pounding of boots grew louder again. She glanced back and saw armored figures emerging from the shadows. They were gaining. Her eyes darted to a narrow hatch in the wall. Without thinking, she dove through it, sliding down a short chute that spat her into another maintenance level. The sound of pursuit was muffled now, but not gone. They would not stop until she was caught, somewhere above her. The prison alarms mixed with the station-wide lockdown order. Ethan tilted his head, hearing faint echoes of a firefight. A guard rushed past his cell toward the sound. Ethan's jaw tightened. She was getting closer. He stood, his muscles tense, ready for whatever came next. Lyra burst into a side passage that connected to the prison sector. Her pulse was so loud in her ears, she almost didn't hear the mechanical voice overhead. "Security breach in detention wing. All units respond." Her chest tightened. They knew she was heading for the prison. It was now or never. She sprinted toward the heavy blast doors that sealed off the detention block. From her belt, she pulled a thin device, a magnetic override she had built in secret. Slapping it onto the lock, she watched as its tiny lights raced in a pattern. The door groaned, sparks flew, and then it slid open, just enough for her to slip through. On the other side, she could already hear the boots of more guards closing in. Her eyes found the row of cells, and one human standing tall behind the glowing barrier. "Ethan," she breathed. And the chase was no longer about running away. It was about breaking him out before the net closed around them both. Lyra's boots skidded across the detention floor as she sprinted toward Ethan's cell. The red glow of the barrier lit his face, making his eyes look sharper, more alive than she had ever seen them. Behind her, the sound of armored boots was closing in fast. "Step back," she called, her voice low but urgent. Ethan didn't ask questions. He took 2 steps back, muscles tense, from her belt. Lyra pulled a stolen security card and slid it into the control panel. For 1 heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the barrier flickered and vanished. The moment it did, Ethan was already moving. A blaster shot tore through the air, striking the wall inches from her head. She spun and fired back with the guard's dropped rifle. Ethan snatched the weapon from her as another guard appeared at the far end of the hall. "Move," he barked, firing 3 quick shots that sent the guard diving for cover. They ran. Side by side, boots pounding against the steel floor. The detention alarms screamed louder now. The system knew a prisoner had escaped. More guards swarmed from the adjoining corridor. Lyra ducked behind a support pillar, firing bursts of plasma to keep them pinned. Ethan tossed her a small stun grenade from the belt of a fallen soldier. "Cover your ears," he warned. Blast echoed like thunder, sending a shockwave down the hall. Several guards collapsed, their weapons clattering to the floor. They didn't stop. Lyra pointed toward the docking bay access. "It's our only way out," she said between breaths. "Then let's hope your ship's faster than their fighters," Ethan replied. "It's not my ship," she admitted. "It's theirs. I'm stealing it." Ethan smirked despite the danger. "Now you're speaking my language." They reached the blast door to the bay, but it was already sealing shut. Lyra slid to her knees, jamming a flat tool into the locking mechanism. Ethan fired down the corridor, keeping the pursuing guards at bay. "Any time now," he called over the rising hum of charging blasters. "Got it," she snapped. The door shuddered and slid open, just enough for them to slip through. The docking bay was chaos. Rows of sleek patrol craft sat waiting, engines cold. 2 alien pilots turned at the sound of the intrusion, hands reaching for sidearms. Ethan didn't hesitate. 2 quick shots, and both were down. Lyra dashed to the nearest fighter. Punching in a rapid override code, the cockpit canopy slid open with a hiss. "Get in!" she shouted, climbing into the pilot's seat. Ethan jumped into the co-pilot's chair, slamming the canopy shut as the bay filled with shouts. The fighters' systems roared to life, docking clamps disengaged, engines spooling up with a deep growl. But as Lyra angled the craft toward the launch tunnel, the bay doors began to close. "We're not making it," Ethan warned. "We are," Lyra growled. Pushing the throttle to maximum, the fighter shot forward, the narrowing gap ahead shrinking with each heartbeat. Blaster fire raked across the hull, the shields flaring with each hit. The gap was almost gone when they cleared it, the edges of the closing doors scraping the shield as they burst into open space. But freedom lasted only seconds. From the darkness, 3 alien interceptors broke formation, their weapons already locking on. "They're faster," Ethan said, checking the radar. "Not faster enough," Lyra replied. Flipping a switch above her head, the fighter dove sharply, skimming the curve of the station before blasting away into the void. Behind them, the interceptors gave chase. Ahead of them, only the stars and the hope that hyperspace was close enough to reach before their enemies closed in. The fighter tore through the black void, its engines screaming as Lyra pushed the throttle past safety limits. Behind them, the alien interceptors closed in, weaving like hunting predators. Ethan's hands gripped the weapons console, firing bursts of plasma that forced the pursuers to scatter. "Hyperspace coordinates ready?" he asked, his voice sharp but steady. "Almost," Lyra replied. Her silver eyes locked on the navigation screen. The moment the numbers lined up, she hit the activation switch. The drive hummed, then stopped. The cockpit lights dimmed, warning symbols flashing across the display. Her stomach dropped. "They've disabled our hyperspace core," she said, her voice tight. A shadow filled the forward viewport. From the darkness emerged a massive alien cruiser, its hull plated in black armor. Its presence blotted out the stars. "This isn't random," Ethan said, his eyes narrowing. "They knew exactly where we'd run." The cruiser's comm system crackled. A cold, familiar voice filled the cockpit. "Pilot of the stolen craft, prepare to be boarded." Lyra froze. She knew that voice. It was High Counselor Veyer, the one who had ordered Ethan's arrest. Her hands tightened on the controls until her knuckles turned white. Ethan's jaw clenched. "So we finally meet without your guards to hide behind." A tractor beam locked onto their ship, dragging them toward the cruiser's docking bay. Inside the bay, the atmosphere shimmered as force shields held the vacuum at bay. The fighter touched down hard, the cockpit canopy sliding open. "Lyra." And Ethan climbed out slowly, weapons hidden but ready. Veyer stepped forward, his black ceremonial armor reflecting the hangar lights. He carried no visible weapon, but his confidence was a weapon in itself. "You've caused quite a spectacle," Veyer said smoothly, his gaze flicking between them. "To steal my ship, to kill my men, to think you could run." "Run?" Ethan said with a grim smile. "No, I'm here to finish this." Veyer's lip curled. "You think you can kill me and walk away? The council will hunt you until your bones turn to dust." Lyra stepped forward, her voice like ice. "Not if they see the truth first." She reached into her suit and pulled out the crystal drive. Veyer's eyes narrowed. "That's mine," he said sharply. "No," Lyra corrected. "This belongs to the galaxy now." With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the drive to Ethan, who caught it and slid it into the fighter's transmission port. Veyer moved instantly, drawing the concealed energy blade. Ethan's blaster was already in his hand, the two locking eyes in a frozen heartbeat. The bay erupted in motion. Veyer lunged, Ethan fired, Lyra dove aside. The shot grazed Veyer's shoulder, but he kept coming, his blade cutting the air where Ethan's head had been a second before. Lyra grabbed a loose cable from the wall and swung it toward the counselor, wrapping it around his sword arm. Ethan seized the moment, driving his shoulder into Veyer's chest and sending him sprawling to the floor. The energy blade clattered away, above them. The fighter's comm screen lit up. The broadcast was already in progress. Holographic projectors across the station began replaying the hidden footage of Ethan's false arrest. Veyer's voice from the recording rang through the hangar. "Make him disappear." The sound froze the nearby guards in place, their faces shifting from obedience to shock. Veyer struggled to rise, fury twisting his face. "You've doomed yourself," he spat. Ethan leveled his blaster. "Maybe, but at least the galaxy knows who you really are." Lyra fired the fighter's engines, the blast of heat forcing Veyer to shield his face. They leapt back into the cockpit as the docking clamps released. This time, the hyperspace drive purred to life. As the fighter shot away from the cruiser, the stars stretched into blinding lines. The last image Ethan saw before the jump was Veyer standing in the hangar, powerless for the first time. The fighter tore through the blue tunnel of hyperspace, its engines steady now. For the first time since the alarms began, the cockpit was quiet. Lyra leaned back in her seat, her hands trembling slightly on the controls. Ethan sat beside her, watching the stars bend and shift beyond the canopy. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the silence of two people who had survived something they shouldn't have. Finally, Ethan broke it. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice low. Lyra glanced at him, her silver eyes calm but fierce. "Yes, I did," she replied. "Your people. They'll call you a traitor now," he said. "They already did the moment I helped you." She answered, a faint smile touching her lips. Far behind them, the broadcast of Veyer's corruption was spreading like wildfire. On distant planets, alien civilians gathered in front of public screens, watching the recording play on repeat. Some were shocked, others angry, and a few afraid. Whispers began to turn into shouts. For the first time in years, the Council's authority was cracking, and everyone knew the name of the human who had lit the match. A soft alert beeped on the fighter's console. Lyra checked the display. Incoming transmission. She hesitated, then opened the channel. A grainy image appeared. A human captain in a battered space uniform. "This is Captain Rourke of the freighter Horizon's Wake. We saw your signal," he said. "You've made some powerful enemies, but also some allies. Meet us at the following coordinates if you want safe passage." The transmission ended, replaced by a set of numbers on the screen. Ethan looked at Lyra. "Do we trust him?" Lyra shrugged. "Trust is a luxury. Survival is the priority." She entered the coordinates into the nav system. The fighter adjusted course, the stars outside shifting slightly. For a moment, they sat in quiet again. Then Ethan spoke. "When I first pulled you out of that wreck, I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Lyra smiled faintly. "When you saved me, you didn't know it would cost you everything." Ethan's gaze was steady. "Some things are worth the cost." Her smile grew just enough to reach her eyes. Outside, hyperspace stretched endlessly. The fighter was a small speck in the vastness, carrying two fugitives who had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. They didn't know what waited at the coordinates, safety, danger, or something in between, but they both knew one thing: whatever came next, they wouldn't be facing it alone.